This is Kai Cutter TV with another presentation. We gotta talk about this. Okay, guys, in life, be careful what you wish for. Joe Biden wished to be elected president of the United States, and take the word elected with a grain of salt because we all know what took place. But he wanted to be in office, and now he's in office. And everything that they were saying about Donald Trump has kids in cages, all this type of stuff. All this stuff is going to backfire and blow up in his face. When Jesus was on this earth and he was dealing with the Pharisees and the priests of his time, he called them hypocrites. That was the main word that he used when he was dealing with these people. Now you look at what's going on at the border and how they're trying to play Trump, like Trump's policies were inhumane and weren't moral policies. The Democrats have no moral ground to stand on. So I don't want to hear morals come out of the Democrats' mouth when you guys are dealing with Planned Parenthood and all these abortion clinics around the United States. And all the rest of the policies that are ungodly policies. So please, spare me your morality talk. Not only are the Republicans saying that Biden's immigration policies are bad, but the Democrats themselves have come out and said that also. Now we have Mexico saying that these policies that Biden are coming up with are bad for everyone. Mexico sees Biden fueling illegal immigrants, creating opportunities for gangs. Mexican officials are concerned the shift in border policies under President Joe Biden is fueling illegal immigration into the United States and creating opportunities for organized crime, Reuters reported, citing internal Mexican government assessments. So Mexico themselves are assessing and telling the American government how their policies should be run. Now, if Mexico can see this, so many people are seeing this, how come Biden and his administration isn't seeing this? Continuing on, the documents seen by Reuters are based on testimony and Mexican intelligence and notes gangs are modifying and expanding their methods of smuggling and gaining customers as the U.S. actions incentivize migration. Now, just recently, the Honduras president in 2014, information is coming out now that he was actually working with the cartels and giving them passes so they can produce their drugs and pump it up north into the United States, which is just ridiculous. And Biden and his administration, either unwittingly or knowingly, are helping these Mexican cartels gain an advantage in Mexico and also at the border of the United States. So we got that and a lot more illegal immigration topics to get into. Check this out.
President Biden is facing criticism from both sides on his immigration policies. Republicans say the White House is allowing too many migrants to cross the border, while human rights groups on the left say they're sheltering them in unsafe conditions. Several media outlets confirmed the number of migrant children detained in border detention centers has tripled over the last 2 weeks. And many migrant shelters say they're running out of room even after expanding capacity due to relaxed COVID restrictions. This afternoon, a group of Republican representatives discussed how they believe the border crisis is impacting the coronavirus crisis.
In terms of unaccompanied minors, the beds are filled to capacity. In terms of adults coming into the country, many of them are infected currently with coronavirus.
The White House responding today with the top diplomat saying the Biden administration is offering, quote, hope to those migrants.
Surges tend to respond to hope. And there was a significant hope for a more humane policy after 4 years of, pent-up demand.
Reporter Jacobson also said the White House is working to provide aid for the areas where these migrants are coming from so they have less incentive to cross the border into America. Meanwhile, human rights groups have also criticized the White House for continuing to operate migrant detention facilities along the border. A United Nations commission called on the White House to find a more humane solution.
Biden administration's Department of Homeland Security is now asking their staff to volunteer to help handle the escalating crisis at the southern border. The DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said that the sheer number of illegal migrants showing up at the U.S.-Mexico border is, quote, overwhelming, and they need help to deal with them. Mayorkas sent an email to his staff saying he activated the volunteer force to support CBP along the southwest border. He added that volunteers will be used in a non-law enforcement capacity, meaning volunteers would manage property, prepare meals, do supply or medicine runs, and also partake in housekeeping. Mayorkas compared the current surge of migrants to that of 2019, which saw more than 140,000 apprehensions a month at its peak, when pleading with staff members to join the volunteer force. President Biden has signed more than 10 executive orders on immigration policy in an effort to reverse policies enacted by the Trump administration, including the Remain in Mexico policy and agreements with the Northern Triangle countries. In addition, Biden has revived the catch and release policy and reopened a number of tent cities in Texas to help house the growing number of illegal migrants.
Arizona's Attorney General says Biden's halt on deportations is one of the poorest policies he's ever seen in government.
Yeah, Whitney, and now AG Mark Brnovich is extending his lawsuit against the administration, trying to put a stop to all of this. 3TV's Kiara Hay joining us live tonight. And Kiara, listening to Mark Brnovich right there, he doesn't sound like he's mincing words.
He really isn't. The Attorney General says, like you said, this is one of the worst policies that he's seen. And he says the 100-day pause on deportation is a lose-lose because it's creating false hope for people who want to enter the country, and it's dangerous for people here in Arizona. But I spoke with an immigration advocate who says that broad generalization of immigrants is not only dangerous, but it's hurtful. Attorney General Mark Brnovich says for far too long, immigration policies in this country have been made based off of
politics.
But now, Brnovich says the Biden administration's 100-day pause on deportations is crossing a line.
And the reality is you have the federal government essentially violating the federal law.
President Biden's original deportation ban was shot down by a federal judge last month. But Brnovich says the Department of Homeland Security issued an interim guidance that essentially does the same thing.
It's not fair to anyone to have people that have been convicted of crimes being released into our community, and it's not fair to have some false hope where immigrants now are flooding to the border.
It's just grotesque.
Isis Gill, a human rights activist, says Brnovich's lawsuit paints all immigrants as criminals, creating false fears.
And we don't think it's appropriate for him to use this type of language and rhetoric to criminalize and demonize our people.
Gill also says the 100-day deportation ban is the least the country can do to give people who were impacted by Trump's immigration laws a fair chance. But according to her, that's not happening.
It's just not doing what it's supposed to. We know for a fact thousands of people are still being deported, and it isn't a hold on anything.
But according to Brnovich, deportations are not happening. And he claims it's not only problematic for people in Arizona, but for others trying to cross the border.
So that means people that have been convicted of crimes, accused of crimes, people are being released to our community that haven't even been tested for COVID-19.
Now, Montana's Attorney General has now joined the fight with Brnovich, and together they are trying to stop this 100-day ban on deportations. Live for you in Phoenix, Kiara Hay, Arizona's Family.
Center for the United States and Mexico at Rice's Baker Institute, just joining us to talk about what we're being told is a crisis at the border. Mr. Bayan, thank you so much for joining us. Is it what we're hearing? Is it a crisis at the border?
Well, that's a question that's been asked quite a few times. I think it is a crisis in many ways. The MPP, the Migration Protection Protocol that President Trump left for the Biden administration to resolve, resulted in a humanitarian crisis. So it's not really any different in terms of the numbers that we are seeing individuals trying to cross the border into the United States, most of them turning themselves in to the Border Patrol and U.S. authorities, but it is a humanitarian crisis. And I think the Biden administration has moved to resolve that and then figure out what to do in Central America so that people don't have to take a trip north through Mexico and stay in Central America, and those who consider that they need or could potentially ask for asylum do so in the capitals of those countries.
One thing I wanted to ask you, do you think that there's heightened attention to this just because we had a change in presidency and administration?
Absolutely. I mean, we saw a very clear break with the Trump administration's policies, which were more along the lines of third country agreements with Guatemala and Mexico to retain those immigrants. The Biden administration now intends to essentially resolve those cases, parole those people into the United States, about 200, 250 at a time, and bring them into the United States to wait for their day in court in the United States. That obviously has a risk that it may send the wrong signal to many people in Central America, and they may think that the country is now open. So far, though, the numbers do not reflect that. We've not seen spikes greater than those we saw during the Trump administration.
While you've been talking, we've actually been showing footage of Texas Governor Greg Abbott at the border yesterday. He said that he wants to focus on security efforts amid the ongoing humanitarian crisis, calling the situation a crisis, and says that cartels are ramping up drug trafficking and human smuggling, and children are coming in at record numbers. Of course, the White House says migrants are fleeing prosecution for violence and economic hardships. So what is the answer here?
Well, I think Governor Abbott wants to run for office in 2024, so he's clearly playing political theater here. The situation is no different than it was in January. I think the numbers were up in January, but they were not any different than under the Trump administration. I think the January numbers are 78,000 migrants asking for asylum at the U.S. border. That reflects the numbers from before, so that has not changed. But it wasn't a crisis before, and it is now. And as for drugs, obviously, there is a big problem. Drugs are coming through Mexico, especially confection or chemical drugs that are coming through the border. But that's a federal issue, and so I think the governor would be better served if he worked with the administration very closely to try to deal with this problem with Mexico. I think in 2015, Texas, I think, passed a bill with $800 million, and then in 2017, it did so again with no results, really. The drug markets in the United States have not substantially changed.
Mr. Payan, I feel like that's a perfect segue for the next question that I was going to ask. Obviously, there's a very limited number of states that share the U.S.-Mexico border. So how do we address this on a federal level to the point where everybody understands? Because not a whole lot of people live in those border communities and understand what's happening.
Well, the very first thing that we need to do is to sort of end the kind of circus that the border has become over the last few years. The border on the U.S. side is actually composed of very safe cities. I mean, we know that Nogales in Arizona, El Paso, Texas, Laredo, Texas, and the South Texas in the Valley are actually quite safe communities, even when their sister communities in Mexico are experiencing high levels of violence. I think we need to work with Mexico. The situation in Mexico, though, it's quite complicated. The president is almost unwilling to work with the Biden administration. There was no progress made in their conversation a couple of weeks ago, perhaps less than 2 weeks ago, but there was very, very little progress. So the U.S. is going to have to push Mexico very hard to re-engage the Merida Initiative or some other form of collaboration against these very violent cartels that do operate in Mexico.
Is there anything else that you would like to tell me that I perhaps forgot to ask?
Yeah, I think that it is time to sort of calm down a little bit and realize that the border is a complicated place, but we also benefit enormously from the border. Texas in particular benefits from the binational relationship. It is the transit point, the destination point, and the origin point of about 2/3 of the binational trade, and obviously very active in its exchanges with Mexico on everything from tourism to shopping to energy exchanges. So clearly, it is in all our benefit to have a good relationship with Mexico and a safe and prosperous border. And I think that should be the goal for both states and both federal governments.
All right. Again, joining us live this morning here is Tony Payan, the director of the Center for the United States and Mexico at Rice's Baker Institute. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
We're having 10 to 12 chases, high-speed chases through our community a week now. And it just is, we've never seen this before.
Now, when you say 10 to 12 high-speed chases, you're talking about car chases through the town?
Car chases through the town, running anywhere from 95 to 105 miles an hour. Right. But with human smugglers that are bringing illegal immigrants through that couldn't come through the other way because most of them have criminal records or trying to circumvent the system.
I heard you on a podcast, I think it was yesterday, saying that break-ins are up as well.
They are. We had a lady 2 weeks ago was at her house that keeps her grandkids. They tried to break into her house. When the alarm went off, they ran. Later that evening, we caught them breaking into another house. We finally caught them. This past weekend, she had her grandkids again at her house. 4 men started running toward her house. Luckily, there was a farmer there that was able to come to her aid before we got the Border Patrol there. And I mean, it's just escalating. There was a time when these immigrants that came through our community and that were docile. These are more aggressive. A lot of them have criminal records. The sexual predators is up 4,400% in our region that they've apprehended. Criminal aliens.